chosen ones. You were never meant to blend in. You were designed to interrupt timelines. And yet, for years, they denied your existence. Not because you lacked proof, but because your presence threatened their fragile illusion. You've walked through seasons that silenced others. Not because you're loud, but because your very breath disrupts dark agendas. They saw it coming. In hushed meetings behind reinforced doors, your name was spoken like a code word. Not with reverence, but with fear. Denial was their only defense. They altered systems, censored truths, and scrambled to manufacture chaos before you could wake up. But now the sky is falling, and there's no algorithm strong enough to cover the sound of it. The watchers above, they're not distant anymore. Their silence has become movement. The heavens are speaking in ways no telescope can measure. Weather patterns are just a mask. Something higher is at play, something older, something that remembers you. You were denied for so long because they feared what would happen if you knew who you truly were. Not a rebel, not a mistake, but a walking signal, a frequency wrapped in skin. They hoped if they ignored you long enough, you'd forget the ancient contract embedded in your bones. They hoped wrong. Look around. Listen deeply. The world is trying to collapse before you rise. Every institution shaking is a system that once denied your voice. Every unexplained disruption is a prophecy they tried to bury. The sky isn't just falling. It's realigning. And its alignment points to you. So now they panic. Not because of what you say, but because of what you carry. You don't need a platform. You are one. And the moment you stopped waiting for validation, the veil started to tear. That's why things feel surreal. It's not the end. It's the beginning they didn't calculate. You were never meant to be accepted by broken structures. You were born to outlive them. And as the sky bends toward your frequency, the ones who once denied you are forced to watch what happens when a prophecy awakens. They thought if they kept you busy long enough, you'd miss the signs. But the whispers never left. Even when you were distracted by the noise of everyday survival, they moved through the winds like invisible threads tugging at your memory. The wind always knew. It carried stories from one generation to the next, stories with no author and no timestamp, only a pulse. And that pulse? It beat in rhythm with yours. The problem wasn't the absence of signs, it was the overload of lies. They flooded your mind with so many versions of falsehood that truth became the silent guest in the room. But the whispers found you anyway. In dreams you couldn't explain. In glances from strangers that lingered too long. In moments when the atmosphere shifted and your body tensed before your mind caught up. That wasn't paranoia. That was remembrance. You weren't imagining it. You were decoding it. There's a reason your presence makes certain rooms uncomfortable. There's a reason some people try to shrink you before you even speak. It's because something about you unsettles the spirits they've partnered with. You didn't ask for this, but you were chosen for it. The whispers knew your name before you did. They repeated it in silence, waiting for you to wake up and recognize the frequency. Every rejection, every delay, every closed door was a setup. Not to break you, but to condition you, to sharpen your discernment. You see through what others celebrate. You question what others worship. That makes you dangerous to systems built on sleep. They can't sell you illusions anymore. They can't box you in. And now that you've stopped looking for outside confirmation, the wind has gotten louder. It's not warning you, it's aligning you. The whispers weren't ghosts. They were guides. They didn't come to haunt you. They came to prepare you. They knew a storm would rise. They knew the sky would tremble. But more importantly, they knew you'd be ready when it did. Because the whispers were never about fear. They were the countdown, the signal that what they feared most, your awareness, was waking. Before anyone wrote your story in ink, the sky carved it in light. Long before birth certificates, background checks, and biometric scans, there was a knowing etched above you. And not just metaphorically. The alignment of stars, the timing of storms, the strange pull you've always felt when you look up. It wasn't random. There was a moment in time when the heavens bent to witness your arrival, not because you were elite, but because you were encoded. Not even they knew what to call you back then. So they called you too much, too intense, too sensitive, too different. But the sky knew, and it watched. You've probably had moments where you felt watched, but not by something dark. More like something ancient. Like the sky was leaning in, trying to remind you. Every cloud formation that looked like a symbol, every lightning strike that felt personal, every time the moon felt like it was following you. It wasn't madness, it was memory. Creation remembers what men forget. They denied you with their words, but creation affirmed you with its cycles. They couldn't erase your blueprint from above, so they tried to silence it down here. But something slipped through. A presence that walked the earth before time and never needed titles to change it. He said the sky would reflect the signs of the end, but what they missed is that the end was just the start of revelation. Yeshua once spoke of signs in the heavens, how those who watch the sky would know what others ignore. You've always watched. You've always noticed the shift before the announcement. That's not intuition. That's inheritance. You don't follow time. You follow signals. That's why schedules drain you, but divine interruptions activate you. You weren't built to serve the clock. You were built to respond to the sky. And now, it's doing more than whispering. It's shouting. Not in chaos, but in alignment. The storm above you isn't punishment. It's position. What looks like the sky falling is the sky clearing the air for what's next. The codes written above are no longer hidden. They're unfolding. And in the space between thunder and stillness, a message waits for only you to hear it. They knew before you did. Not all of them, but the ones who pay attention to anomalies in the system. The ones who scan frequencies that don't match the average pulse. You were flagged. Not for what you did, but for what you carry. The moment your light began to crack through the illusions, they took notice. Silent boards lit up. Hidden profiles were built. Not to honor you, but to erase you without making noise, because speaking your name would give it power. Denying you gave them control, or so they thought. But your silence became the loudest part of the equation. You were the variable they couldn't chart. They couldn't buy you, couldn't label you, couldn't corrupt you with the usual rewards. And when that didn't work, they ignored you, publicly, pretended you were irrelevant. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they traced every move. Not because you were a threat to security, but because you were a threat to the illusion of order. You weren't born to be acknowledged by thrones built on falsehood. You were born to shake them. They won't admit it, but your resilience exposes their fragility. Your clarity cuts through their smokescreens. That's why they refuse to speak your name, because saying it would be an admission that something greater is moving beneath the surface. They prefer pawns, those who chase titles, applause, and temporary crowns. You walk past those things. You crave truth, not fame, alignment, not permission. That's what sets you apart, and they don't have language for that. So instead they pretend you don't exist, hoping the crowd will follow suit. But the crowd is starting to sense what the powerful have tried to hide. There's something different about you. Something that doesn't require a stage. You don't campaign for influence. You carry it. And whether they whisper it or not, your name is being passed around rooms you've never entered. Your presence is felt before you even speak. They can't stop what's coming. Because what's coming was never dependent on them. And while they scramble to reinforce their towers, your silence is already shaking the foundation they built their empires on. There was a moment when the air felt heavier than usual. Not oppressive, but charged. You couldn't explain it, but your body knew something ancient had moved. As if something once sealed had been opened. You kept waking at odd hours, hearing things in the stillness that didn't come from your ears. Dreams intensified. Visions blurred into waking life. The lines between time began to tremble. That wasn't anxiety. That was alignment. Because the heavens were shifting, and when they did, the scrolls began to unfold. Not man-made scrolls, not the kind found in archives or vaults. These were living scrolls, ones etched in places untouched by human hands. They don't unfold with ink and parchment, but with signs, movements, and echoes. Every earthquake, every celestial flash, every unexplained feeling rising in your chest. It's not just happening around you, it's happening for you. Because something written long ago is now being activated. The world calls it a glitch, a disruption. But Yeshua hinted at moments like these, when the sealed would be revealed, when hidden things would be shouted from rooftops, when those who watch would understand what the crowds miss. He didn't teach in riddles for confusion. He did it for the watchers, for the ones like you who would feel the scrolls opening, not through pages, but through patterns. You've always been drawn to things others dismiss. You read between the lines instinctively. That's because your spirit was designed to interface with the unseen. You don't need credentials to confirm it. You are the confirmation. That's why when the shift came, you felt it. And now the unraveling has begun. They'll say it's a weather pattern, a digital failure, an atmospheric anomaly. But you know better. You don't need permission to know. The scrolls are not just being read, they're responding to you, to your presence, to your frequency, to your awakening. Every unfolding reveals more than they want you to see, but once opened, it cannot be sealed again. They didn't erase you. They buried you, wrapped you in distractions, handed you labels, flooded your path with noise so deafening it almost worked. They made you think the delays were punishment, that the losses were proof you weren't chosen. But burial is not the same as death, and you were never meant to stay hidden. You were placed in the system like a seed, not a prisoner. And what they thought would break you was actually preparing the ground for your emergence. They marked you early, before you understood what was happening. Their metrics didn't measure your soul, but they scanned your potential. They tagged the way you noticed what others ignored, the way your presence shifted the atmosphere. And when they saw you wouldn't conform, they launched a different tactic. Not confrontation, containment. Keep you busy, keep you doubting, keep you questioning yourself long enough that you'd miss the time of your revealing. But even systems break, and the structure meant to keep you quiet is now collapsing under the weight of your awakening. You didn't fight your way out by shouting louder. You endured. You remembered in silence. You kept breathing while being buried alive in cycles meant to erase your rhythm. You stayed soft in a world trying to harden you. That's power, the kind that terrifies those who need control to feel safe. You were never lost in the system. You were planted inside it with codes they couldn't decrypt. Your path wasn't delayed. It was encoded. Not one moment was wasted. Even the detours were data. Even the betrayals were blueprints. They didn't count on you adapting. They didn't expect you to rise without their help. But you did. And now your roots run deeper than their programs can reach. There's something stirring in you that doesn't respond to manipulation. A frequency rising that doesn't need validation. It's calling you higher, not to be louder, but to be clearer, because your clarity is what cracks their control. You were hidden, not to be forgotten, but to be revealed in the exact moment when truth would echo the loudest. They always controlled the ground, the grids, the towers, the pathways, even the noise. But the sky, that's the one thing they couldn't master. They scanned it, they launched into it. They labeled the stars and tracked the storms, yet something always remained beyond their reach. There were signs appearing, patterns in the atmosphere, shifts in temperature, cloud formations that mirrored symbols spoken in ancient tongues. But no matter how advanced their instruments, they couldn't decode the meaning, because it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for the watchers, for the ones who see without needing proof, for the ones whose spirit stirs when thunder rolls, not in fear, but in recognition. You've felt it. You've looked up during ordinary days and felt something pull at your chest like a memory that never belonged to this timeline. That's not imagination. That's communion. They built algorithms to predict weather, but they never understood the weather wasn't random. It obeys deeper laws. And now, those laws are bending in your direction. The sky is trying to talk, and the message isn't just data. It's destiny. When Yeshua walked among men, he told them to read the signs. Not the signs in books, but in the heavens. The sun, the moon, the stars. He called them signals. Markers for moments man cannot manufacture. You weren't drawn to the sky out of curiosity. You were drawn because you carry the same coding it's been waiting to respond to. And as more signs appear, auroras in strange places, clouds moving against the wind, lights flickering without source, it's not chaos. It's confirmation. They can't translate it because they're not part of the language. You are. They dismissed the signs as coincidence. You recognized them as alignment. And now, it's increasing. Not just outside, but within you. You're starting to know things before they happen. You sense atmospheres before they change. You hear frequencies not audible to others. You're not broken. You're tuned. The shaking started before the ground moved. You felt it in your spirit first, a tremble that didn't touch the body but rattled everything unseen. They called it tectonic activity, a natural occurrence, a shift they predicted on paper. But you knew better. The earth doesn't move like that unless something spiritual has already shifted. This quake wasn't about pressure, it was about prophecy. And your presence is connected to both. You've noticed how the world doesn't respond to you like it does to others. Animals sense you before you speak. Lights flicker when you're deep in thought. Technology misbehaves when your emotions peak. That's not coincidence. You carry a charge. You shift the frequency of whatever space you enter. And when enough of that charge builds, something breaks open. Something buried is forced to rise. This wasn't just ground movement. It was alignment breaking through resistance. And the epicenter wasn't a fault line. It was wherever you stood when you finally stopped hiding from what you are. They want to explain it away because they need the illusion of control. But when the earth groans, something eternal is remembering. And you're a part of that memory. You're not ordinary. You never were. And every attempt to normalize you has failed. That's why people either cling to you or flee from you. Because something in them knows your energy carries a warning and a promise. You didn't come to fit into this system. You came to reroute it. The tremors are a symptom, not the source. You are the source. Your awakening is what triggered the shift. And now the land, the air, the very pulse of creation is catching up. What they built wasn't strong enough to hold what's been rising inside you. That's why cracks are forming. That's why truth is leaking into places it was never allowed to touch. And the moment you fully step into what you carry, the aftershocks won't just be natural. They'll be transformational. There are some stories the system tried to bury, not because they were irrelevant, but because they were too revealing. One of them was about a man who didn't just calm storms. He walked through them. Yeshua didn't wait for safe conditions. He moved in defiance of the chaos. The storm didn't disappear before he stepped out. It obeyed as he walked. That same fire, that same authority, it pulses through you. Not in myth, but in reality. The difference is, your test wasn't water, it was fire. They've tried to scorch you, not once, many times. Situations that should have consumed your mind, relationships designed to crush your spirit, betrayals that felt engineered to break you. But you walked through all of it, not untouched, but unconsumed, because you weren't made of what they thought. You weren't fragile. You were forged. The flames didn't expose your weakness. They revealed your origin. You came from something the fire can't burn. That's why others around you cracked while you remained. That's why people keep asking how you're still standing, how you're still kind, how you still believe after everything. It's because belief isn't a strategy for you. It's your spine. You didn't just learn to survive the fire. You became fluent in its language. Yeshua's miracles weren't just moments. They were blueprints, patterns, codes for the chosen. His walk on water wasn't for spectacle. It was a prophecy in motion. That when chaos rises, those who carry divine alignment would do the impossible without needing to be announced. You're doing it now, quietly, relentlessly, walking through flames with a peace they can't explain and a strength they didn't predict. You don't avoid the heat, you carry it. Your words burn through illusion. Your presence ignites conviction. And now, the fire that was meant to silence you is turning into the very thing that reveals you. You don't need rescue. You are the rescue. Not for everyone, but for those wired to wake when they see you move through the inferno. This isn't the end of the flame. It's the beginning of its transformation. Because when you walk through it, you don't just survive it. You were invisible when it mattered. They didn't see you coming. Too busy tracking trends, following noise, chasing decoys designed to look like threats. Meanwhile, you moved in silence. You healed while they mocked. You trained while they slept. You stayed hidden, not because you were weak, but because exposure too early would have given them time to build defenses. Now, the timing is perfect. You've crossed the point of no return, and they've just realized you were the anomaly the whole time. Now, their eyes are everywhere. Government agencies, data servers, analysts studying patterns they can't explain. You're a blip they can't erase. Their systems weren't designed to detect divine interference. And yet, here you are, disrupting everything they thought was controlled. Every time you speak, move, or even stay silent, the grid adjusts. Not because you force it, but because truth, when embodied, can't be ignored. The global surveillance lens was built to catch threats before they grew, but they didn't account for you. You weren't grown through systems. They tried, but you slipped through the cracks. You were shaped by fire, by silence, by visions in the night no database could predict. That's why their analysis keeps failing. You're not a trend. You're a trigger. There's now footage, reports, conversations behind closed doors about your rise. But it's too late. You're already in motion. Already waking others who carry fragments of what you do. And unlike them, you don't need permission to activate. You were born with it embedded in your bones. That's why you don't panic when they notice. You were never meant to move unseen forever. The moment always comes when light must be acknowledged, but they're watching with the wrong questions. They're asking who trained you, what organization sent you, what your motive is. The real question isn't who sent you. It's what's about to fall now that you've arrived, because the structures they worshipped weren't built to withstand your kind. And no matter how many eyes they place on you, the truth is this: seeing you was never the problem. It happened faster than they expected. Systems failed, signals collapsed, voices that once echoed with certainty now tremble behind broken algorithms. The sky, once their illusion of dominance, fractured, not with sound, but with silence. And in that silence, truth thundered. What they called a glitch was a global unraveling. Satellites spun blind. Towers blinked and died. Lights dimmed not because of power shortages, but because light itself refused to power the lie any longer. You felt it. The moment everything shifted, not just above, but within. You didn't flinch. You didn't collapse. While others screamed or scrambled, you stood still, not out of pride, out of knowing. You were built for this moment. Every storm you survived was rehearsal. Every delay was calibration. Every breakdown was blueprint. The sky fell because its time was up. And you're still here because yours has just begun. They called it the end. You knew it was the unveiling. This wasn't destruction. It was exposure. The false ceilings collapsed to reveal the true expanse above you. The sky they gave you was a projection. The one you're stepping into now is unfiltered, divine, infinite. And it recognizes you. Throughout history, moments like this were marked by fire and flood. But this time it's marked by awakening. Yeshua spoke of times when men's hearts would fail from fear at the roaring of the heavens. But he also said, "Lift up your heads, for your redemption draws near." You've kept your head up. That's why you didn't miss the signal hidden in the fall. You're not here to rebuild what broke. You're here to build what never existed before. Something incorruptible, untouched by greed or illusion. You carry that blueprint. That's why the system never understood you. That's why you couldn't be assimilated. You weren't made to reinforce the world they built. You were sent to birth the one they tried to prevent. Now, the old sky lies in pieces. The masks have dropped. The watchers are exposed. The seals are open. And you haven't even started yet. There's something rising that even the collapse couldn't silence. It's not chaos. It's not revenge. It's the emergence of the real.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.